Good morning, people of the internet. You are listening to Debi Radio, 79.5 FM, a podcast where we discuss the movie Grosse Pointe Blank 1 minute at a time. I'm your co-host, Hugh David.
And I'm your other co-host, Dev Sodiger. And on today's show, we're going to be looking at minute 27. And joining us on today's show, we have Aaron Newworth of Out Now with Aaron and Abe, as well as a writer at We Live Entertainment. Welcome, Aaron.
Hello. I'm back.
Yeah. Another day, another minute.
I still can't get my head around the fact we're doing this format. This format works. People like to follow this format. Still blows my mind.
You missed the most hilarious conversation that Hugh and I had when I first pitched this to him. We were talking on the phone, which we never do. We normally communicate like through Facebook chat or whatever.
Text.
But this is serious.
Yeah, no, scheduled phone call and everything, like super authentic. I had just driven actually down to the South Bay to do some stuff, and I was sat in the car trying to convince Hugh that this was a real thing, that this was a format that people would listen to, and that there would actually be content in which to discuss this format.
Yeah, you were right. I was wrong.
I play basketball. What do you do? Oh, I talk about the 1997 George Armitage film, Grosse Pointe Blank, minute by minute with various guests on a podcast. Oh, is that so? Okay.
Exactly. Well, the thing is, I've done various types of podcasts for 6-7 years now, on and off, and guested on a whole bunch of others. And it was just one of those things where the format itself I didn't understand, how interesting it can be to go this deep into these film experiences and what we have on the screen. And I love commentary, so you would have thought I would have got it, but it was the realization as to how deep you could go, on 60 seconds when you don't need to be just trying to talk about it in 60 seconds. I was like, oh, okay.
I mean, whilst it has some comparisons to commentaries, it's still a step change, right? Like, instead of spending a minute talking about a minute, you're spending 20-30 minutes talking about a single minute, and that's blowing things up quite a lot. And
absolutely.
I think there are definitely some films that can't weather it, but I'm a sucker for this film, so
well that was the thing that in the end sold me on it, was the fact that this is your favorite film of all time.
Yeah.
You loved it so much you wanted to devote the time to a podcast, and I was like, okay, I can get on board with that.
So, Aaron, how did you discover the movies by minute format?
I think, like most people, I just heard about the Star Wars minute, just that existed, and it's not that I found it laughable. It was more like, well, that's a choice. And thinking at that time, it's like, well, that's certainly, you certainly get a lot of episodes out of that. That's for sure. It's a lot of movie to cover. And I never listened to it, because it's just more like, that exists. That's a thing, I guess. Okay, cool. Then I heard about the Heat one, the one that they did Heat 1 minute at a time. And for whatever reason, that intrigued me more. Like, I love Star Wars, but like, I've seen Star Wars so many times where it's like, yeah, I get it. Minute by minute, cool, got it. Heat was like, and I love Heat. Heat's one of my favorite movies also, but that's such an interesting choice to be like, that would, like, for whatever reason, it registered for me more clearly as far as like, that would be neat to like really dig into Heat, a 3-hour movie at that level of minutia. So that's like where I heard of it. I've since like I've been on a few of these minute by minute podcasts. I haven't listened to any one of these like religiously, in the manner of like, oh, that's starting up, let me definitely get on episode 1 from now. With the exception of this one, I'm like, well, it's Grosse Pointe Blank. I need to hear about this. Oh yeah, that's generally it. Hearing those early ones and then just going from there.
I must admit, I will try and listen to the Heat one, because I am a Michael Mann obsessive since I was in my early teens, so I'm on board. I'll be on board with that.
I think there's something nice about the self-encapsulated nature of doing this for a standalone film.
Sure.
Yes.
And like, you know, I love Star Wars Minute. I've listened to a good chunk of Star Wars Minute, although admittedly not all of it, because I'm honestly not interested in all of those films.
Mhm.
But it does feel like a fairly daunting task to get into that one, right? Like there are so many movies
Yeah.
and so many series, and it just feels like it would never end. Even like, and I think they did a fantastic job on it, but the Cornetto trilogy minute, because they did spaced one episode at a time, and then they dived
Oh
into the
boy.
movies, and it's like that's a lot. I mean, it is kind of self-contained, right? You know, you've got a defined endpoint, but just one of those films that you really, really love, just diving into that one for, you know, whatever it is, like, you know, 100, 200 episodes of 30 minutes a piece is manageable. I feel like for me, the couple that I always think of are Princess Bride Minute and Fifth Element Minute, which were both really, really excellent takes, but they had that defined lifespan, which I think helps for this format, because otherwise it just becomes, you know, intimidating.
Mm.
I'm not surprised at this point because there's podcasts for everything, but I didn't know there was a Cornetto trilogy minute podcast, but that makes a lot of sense to me because Edgar Wright packs the screen with stuff.
Yeah.
So it's,
Yeah.
that would benefit from a minute by minute breakdown
Yeah.
with all things
Yeah.
going on.
I mean, the fun thing if you did it, yeah, doing it minute by minute. If I was involved in that, the great thing is I could actually then bring in the personal stuff because some of those films are shot here where I live. But yeah, it is that kind of film. Like you say, he packs the screen. I mean, Space was like that with loads of North London stuff. It's such a North London show. You know,
Meanwhile, we're talking about this movie, which is well
yes,
made, but you really need like a nice group of weirdos that want to talk about Grosse Pointe Blank to dig into it on a deep level. Like we
yes.
are.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And one of the big surprises for Devin and I when we started researching this is the fact that it's not even set in Grosse Pointe.
Yeah,
Like it's not shot, sorry, in Grosse Pointe.
yeah.
It's like, oh, okay. There's all these personalized ideas and elements, and there's like, yeah, stock footage, and it's LA after that.
Yeah.
But that
Uh,
speaks to the strength of the film.
yeah. So yesterday we were talking about the song that cues up right at the end of that minute, and
Mm-hmm.
is what we open with here. This is Martin Blanc saying goodbye to his mother, and then going to visit his father's grave before settling into the hotel and driving back into downtown Grosse Pointe, or uh, downtown part of LA in reality. But that song, we kind of did a little bit of diving in, and this is actually not a song per se. It's a little something that Joe Strummer put together specifically for the soundtrack for this movie, for this scene. And you know, I think, Aaron, you mentioned yesterday about how much more impactful the scene at his father's grave was when you were a kid, and I kind of felt the same way. And I think the scoring might be actually quite a big part of that, because it brings forth those emotions, right? It's very poignant. There's no dialogue. It's just him walking up to the grave and emptying this bottle of Glenfiddich, I think, whiskey,
Mm.
over the grave, right? Like, you know, he's gone home. He feels like he needs to go to his father's grave. But at the same time, you get the sense that there's really no deep emotion there, particularly no
No deep
loss.
positive one. It's entirely negative. I mean, it's whatever the case is, which is something I'm happy to explore as far as what that relationship was. It wasn't a good one when he left Grosse Pointe. This is not the person he needed to say goodbye to. If anybody, this is the last thing he would have regretted. It seems like, whether or not he was abusive to him, abusive to the mom, it's really whatever that ambiguity is, it's all summed up right. Like when I watched this for like maybe the second or third time in my life, when I was watching with my mom, we saw that scene and she's like, that's all we need to hear about him. Like that was her reaction to that. Like it really just narrows it right away to whatever this was. It's not a thing for Martin. It's a strong negative reaction where he gets there and he rewards his father with exactly what he loved the most, which apparently was alcohol.
Yeah. I mean, you can tell from the dates on the gravestone. He passed away a couple years after Martin left.
Uh-huh.
Martin's presumably still in the military. Whether he, you could say maybe he was on duty and couldn't return for the funeral, or more likely, I suspect he just didn't care to. Um, it's clear because we know he hasn't been back since he graduated. Yeah,
And obviously,
it's
whatever drove him away and gave him that moral flexibility and all that, at least one symptom of that had to be whatever relationship he had at home with his father.
exactly. Yeah.
Do we think that at one level, potentially in terms of screenwriting, that this is, if not a cop out, at least cliche, and is it, or is it that this is more meant to reflect the town in question and to say, look, everyone thinks this is a pretty suburb. The reality is,
I don't. I think it's more of a cop out, but I think it's done to progress the story in a quick way. We talk about how like a huge part of this film was this challenge of bringing pace to the movie, keeping it at pace, keeping it fairly concise. And I think, honestly, I don't think there's a more concise way that you can express all of the sentiment and emotions that are expressed in this scene, right? And even if you think of the act of him walking up and silently emptying a whiskey bottle over the grave before just like dropping the bottle as well and walking off, right? But then you layer in that scoring, the which was clearly a very intentional choice given that it was composed specifically for the scene. I think it says very clearly, like, this is a thing that shaped Martin Blank that we don't want to spend more than whatever it is, like 15-20 seconds of screen time on, because that's all that's needed and that's all that needs to be said. And it uses very route methods to do it because those methods work.
Yeah, I entirely agree. I mean, it's reliant on efficiency to move things along, and I don't, the alternative is having excessive dialogue and exposition and whatnot, and things that are leaning more towards explaining who Blank is earlier than the film really wants to. So it's like, what's the point of it? We can get away with showing you exactly how he feels about his father. He poured a drink on his grave and dropped the bottle. Done. Like that's we spend a good a minute or two with his mother because he cares about her. We don't get that same luxury with the father. That says plenty without having to spell it out for you with hackneyed dialogue.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. So one of the elements that is cut, given what we were saying, is actually some dialogue from the fourth draft, where Martin says, "Hey, Pop, you got off easy. The house is a 7-Eleven. Mum's a psychopharmacological punching bag, and I murder for cash. If you were here, I think you'd be proud." And that's it. He doesn't even get out of the car. He just pulls up, says this to the headstone, and drives off. And it is one of those things where I think the cliche or the tradition of, the pouring one out, I think is better and more effective by far. I think that's I think the original intended dialogue is just, I mean, I can see why they put that in there. It would certainly make for an easier shoot. You don't have to try and find or set up a fake headstone and cover it in booze.
Even that dialogue is just filler. That just feels like stuff. It's like, we need a scene where he like visits his dad's grave. What does he say?
Yeah, because you've just seen the
give
mum.
him just list some things to kind of get a cry and then get out of the scene.
Yeah, absolutely. What does anyone know where that tradition starts of the pouring the shot out or pouring the drink on the floor or emptying the bottle? I've seen it for so many years, and I've never actually seen it in real life.
To be clear, I mean, you're mentioning it in the way where when you say like pour one out, that's like a respectful way of doing it. When you say so, like you pour one out for somebody, it's like, yeah, that's a tribute. This is very much not that. This is like I don't know what the proper terminology is for the different versions of alcohol drainage, but this is very much a disrespectful version of it compared to pour one out for the homies, that kind of thing. This is more of like there's one thing you liked and I'm giving it to you. Here it is, and that's it. Like again, don't know the term for it. Where did it start? No idea.
Yeah.
The
Okay.
I'm sure we could look up the the history of this if we really needed to and find like some trace some origin of it, but offhand
It
I couldn't tell you.
yeah, it seems to be derivative of libations made to the gods.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and it's just evolved from that. I mean, it's
Because this is
I
done
know
sarcastically, essentially. So,
right, exactly. And I think um, for me, like it was very much a thing on the Irish side of my family when I was growing up that this was a
Yeah.
thing that was done,
Yeah.
and
I've always
that's
seen the
always
Irish do it. Yeah.
yeah, and that's
yeah,
how
the
I always
music
read it
certainly
in
throws it
this.
there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So apparently it goes back to ancient Egypt. Earliest document cases of it are using water instead of alcohol, which is symbolic because obviously it's a very precious, very important, life-giving liquid. However, and that was to the deities. However, when pouring out liquids to honor the dead, these would often include things like milk, honey, wine, and other possible alcohol. The idea was to pour a little of it out for the tribute and then drink the rest yourself. And then this is because this is apparently there's an entire papyrus dedicated to these, summarizing this stuff from 1250 BC, which is how we know this. And then it carries on from there into ancient Greece, ancient Rome. So this is a very ancient one. We know it had, but it also is global. Ancient China had various versions of this. Various groups in South America had versions of this. Apparently, this is a standard across most African cultures, which is fascinating. The idea that this is something that we've all done in one form or another for centuries. I did not expect to see to sort of realize it was that deep, that it had that significance, and suddenly that lifts the scene for me, in the sense of having described it as a cliche earlier. Now I'm thinking, well, okay, but it's actually, as you say, they take it and do their own twist on it. It's not respectful. It's in the way he does it. He deliberately upends it, as you said earlier, Aaron. Yeah.
Because
Very interesting.
you could argue it's the most, it's arguably the darkest moment of the film.
Mm.
You can look at like maybe when he murdered when he kills a lot of people with the pen because the film stops dead from being anything humorous. But I mean, there's still like the sexiness of it as far as like a hitman is
Mm.
doing a job during a review. But even then, like it's still like the music fades and it's just him stabbing a guy in the neck. You could match maybe that scene up with this, but this is a moment where the facade is gone on Martin. He's not
Mm.
trying to like play any angle here. He's just visiting his father, who he clearly did not have a good relationship with, and you know, pouring alcohol over, essentially desecrating his grave. I mean, like that's
Yes.
what the scene
Yes.
is.
Yes.
So it's like
yeah.
there's no fun end that's following up the I didn't realize my mom is like having a mental breakdown and
Mm.
this is
Mm.
why my house is gone. Like
Mm.
it's a pretty dark segment right here in the movie.
Yeah. I mean, when we talked to the previous guest about his time with Dr. Oatman, I was mentioning the fact that Oatman seems to be more of a Jungian than a Freudian because there's focus on the dreams. But here it's definitely, this is a much more traditionally Freudian kind of take on things. Clearly here are the ingredients, Martin, for who you are.
Yeah.
Cool.
Um,
Okay.
so towards the end of this minute, we get to the hotel. I'd never actually recognized until watching this minute by minute that you do get an outside shot of the hotel,
Oh, okay.
which I
Quick
can't
one.
recognize. Haven't looked up. I don't know if you looked this up, Aaron.
I haven't. It just seems. I'm sure they found some place.
Yeah,
Got a shot.
more stock footage, or yeah. But the thing that always fascinated me as a kid was him putting everything inside the wall vent. I always
Mm-hmm.
thought that was like one of those little things that just really sold it as like this is a guy who's experienced at doing this kind of thing. It's just like he has the electric drill with him. He just pulls aside the dresser, unscrews the vent, everything goes in the vent, seals back up. He's good.
It's. I wouldn't call this like a process movie necessarily in the same way that like I don't know Ridley Scott does, where like you just see all of the pieces and everything, and there's extra time spent to show you the mechanics of how people do their stuff.
Mm.
But this is like it's a neat little bit of business as far, and you get a little bit of that in like some like the Miami hit things like that, where you just like you see the work that he's doing to get stuff
Yes.
done, and that's a little bit
Right.
here. But I do
Right.
like that it's a thing where now I know this. Now I know hotel vents, great way to stash your supply of things. And then I think to like No Country for Old Men, where that's a big part
Yes.
with Josh Brolin, where he gets two different rooms that are across from each other, specifically so he has the vent access, which comes in handy later on when he's dealing with like Shigor coming after him and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's saying like I don't necessarily think like the Coen brothers thought, you know what, in that George Armitage 1997 classic Grosse Pointe Blank, that was a good way to store some, or like Cormac McCarthy wrote No Country thinking about Grosse
Yeah.
Pointe Blank
Yeah.
and the hotel, the vent
Right.
usage. And I'm sure in movies there's probably other vent usage before in that specific kind of way as like a place to stash stuff. But
Yeah.
it's just like I like that, we were just talking about the universality of pouring drinks out. Now we're thinking of, hitmen or people of a certain kind of profession using hotel vents as storage because of paranoia
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
needing like a safe room of some kind or whatnot for their materials.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Because they don't.
it's
Go on.
oh, I was going to say it's an interesting play on Chekhov's gun as well, right? Like
Yes.
normally, if you were to see this in a movie, you'd think, well, at some point his hotel room is going to get ransacked by like
Yes.
the feds or by Felix,
Yeah.
and the fact that he's hidden it away is going to pay off in some manner,
Yeah.
or it's going to be found out and he's going to go back to try and find it and it's not there, and that's going to play out somehow.
Yeah.
And instead, the only purpose of this is to once again reinforce that he knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, this is going back not just in movies, but I mean, it's a staple of classic crime fiction. I mean, going back to the 60s, probably. Do I remember any of it in the 30s and Dashiell Hammett? I probably with the
Again, like it's a
Continental Op,
maybe, like it's but
because it's all about the fact that they won't pay to stay in a hotel that would have a safe,
yeah.
and you can't trust the safe behind the reception desk, right? It's that sense of, well, what is the next best thing? Well, I'll take the screwdriver to the wall. So yeah, it is very much again, as you guys say, it's an interesting tradition that now tells us something again about Martin and his professionalism, and it is very much
it shows the industriously and like why he's an expert, why he's
Yes.
why he's comfortable being on his own, working for himself, doing, and like why Grosser hates and admires him. Like it's all
Yeah.
there because this guy is doing exactly, he's
Right.
he's doing the work that's required to be this specific kind of guy and be this good at the job.
Yeah.
Right. He's not just prying up floorboards or taping it to the underside of a drawer. The things that you are just stayed at this point.
He's not
It's something
sloppy.
that's a little
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good word to describe Grosser. Sloppy.
I mean, when he was, I can't remember which guest said it, but that he's the wet work guy. Like that's so on point for Grosser. It's exactly right.
Yeah. The other thing I like is Martin's choice of bedtime reading.
Yeah.
He's the kind of guy, that's what he would read. He's not going to read fiction, or it's not going to be like in Pulp Fiction where Travolta's reading Modesty Blaze. It's not going to be a reference. It's going to be a character point, and it's yeah.
And
I was reading the cover. I wrote it down. It was like the big headlines: "Making Sense of Creation." and then what I like is that the subtitle of it is actually interesting, because it feels very specific, where it says the story of a mediocre Genesis, and that I feel like, is that like a comment on the town of like the people he's dealing with, or even himself? Like what are we referencing here? Like is the idea it's like this just like this whatever kind of average guy, or is the town like coming back to the town? Is that what all the people are? It's just kind of like this whatever place that he's in now.
Yeah.
Something I like about, I don't know what other episode we could explore this in, but something, especially because we're not going to talk about the reunion at all, but something I always like about this movie that I've thought about over the years is, as much as Martin is, a murderer, he's also like the most successful person at the reunion. He's the guy that left the actual town. He's the guy that went out there and did something with his life. I mean, everybody else is, at least that we meet, that is important in some way, stayed and, maybe like had a family or has a job or something. But Martin's the guy that's like, I got out there. Like, I left this place.
Yeah, and also another telling thing is the other ones that were moderately successful were his friends in high school, right?
Sure.
The IT guy, whose name I always forget. You've got Kevin, the lawyer, who I think probably didn't have a whole lot of friends, but was somewhat friendly with Martin. And of course, Paul, who's now in real estate, which is, lucrative business. And all of these guys were the outcasts in high school. And I think that is a conscious choice, right? Like, this is clearly written by guys who felt that way.
Yeah, I mean, because as we've said,
I'm nodding. I should say yes out loud. I'm sorry, it's a podcast.
A little bonus feature for the YouTube watchers there.
Yeah. I mean, as we've noted in previous episodes, the script, we discovered that the original script, while it was written by a native of Michigan, the rewrites are by Cusack himself and two of his friends that he grew up with, who are producers on the film as well. And so, yes, I think that very much goes to the heart of what you guys are saying and how it kind of confirms what they want to get across here about, because they're the ones who made it out to Hollywood,
And even casting wise, it's a lot of people that are like Piven and him grew up together. Like there's a lot of friends and there's a lot of improvising in the movie. There's written stuff, but obviously there's a lot of like playing between all of them. So
yes, yeah, very much so. Oh, and then we get our feds. The comedy feds are back.
Yeah, just one brief glimpse of them at the end of the minute.
Yeah, you can see all the junk on the just at the end of the minute. Well, I'll save it for the next one.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Well,
this was minute 27 of the Grosse Pointe Blank podcast, Debi Radio 79.5 FM, featuring your hosts, co-writers, and co-producers, myself, Dev Sodiger, and my buddy here, Hugh David.
Today's guest was Aaron Newirth of Out Now with Aaron and Abe, and writer at We Live Entertainment. Aaron, where can people find you if they want to get in touch with you online?
For sure. You just mentioned the podcast I co-host with my friend Abe, Out Now with Aaron and Abe. We talk about weekly movie releases and have tons of bonus episodes and fun commentaries every month and everything like that. That's everywhere you can find podcasts. I write for We Live Entertainment for movie reviews, Wise to Blue for Blu-ray and Criterion reviews, and I'm on Twitter at AaronsPS4. And my personal blog, the code is Zeke.com. Everything I do ends up over there.
Fantastic. You reminded me I need to sort out the same thing with my blog. You can find us wherever you found us now, as well as on all good podcast players, YouTube, X, whatever else it is by the time you hear this, and Spotify. Handle at all of those is at Debi Radio, DEBI Radio. And as our website as well, you can go to debiradio.com. Once again, DEBI Radio.
And if you want to chat with us, you can find us on our Facebook listeners group, Debi Radio 79.5 FM Fan Club.
Sure was clear that all of this was new. Concentrating hard like a little girl, smoking for the first time. It wasn't a moment, it was a feeling.